we have with us Marg Franklin. Marg Franklin is former president and CEO of CFA Institute and senior advisor. Marg is the former president and CEO of CFA Institute, where she led the organization's global strategy focused on ethics, sustainability, and the future of the investment community. With extensive experience in investment consulting and institutional advisory services, Marg is recognized internationally for her leadership in capital markets, investment trust, and ESG integration. Franklin is a frequent speaker and advocate for long-term sustainable investing and professional excellence. She's going to be, she's going to have a conversation with Nymia Almeida, which is a partner of Warshall and Advisors. Nymia is a senior financial executive and corporate credit analyst with more than 35 years of experience across Latin America and North America. She served as senior vice president at Moody's Investor Service in Mexico City, leading credit analysis and rating processes for major Latin American issuers, and now specializes in spotting and developing the most promising talents in the financial industry. Thank you very much for being with us, Marg, Nymia. It's a pleasure. And for all of the audience, for being with us in such a special occasion for CFA Society. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hola. Buenas noches. As the minute of my Spanish, I'm from Canada, so those are the only two languages I speak, English and French. It is Nymia's and my great honor to be here with you today. And we're going to try and have a conversation around leadership, talent, thinking about your own careers, no matter where you're at, and the perspectives that we can bring from executive all the way through to early career people and what we're seeing, because as you know, just about everything is changing everything everywhere all at once. So we hope you will find this engaging. As ever, I know that you can submit questions and Ignacio will be able to ask them for us later. So what we're going to do, we're going to be two women doing what women do. So this is going to be, we're going to ask the question of each other, and then we're going to have a conversation. And hopefully we'll be able to provide you with not only facts and data and frameworks, but some of the nuance that we observe and have observed over the course of our careers. So as we were preparing for this, I said, I'll take the first question. And it's, Nymia, to ask you, first of all, your experience in the field, seasoned, senior, and now really transitioning to identifying talent, thinking about the things that make good leaders. In your conversations and time with boards and executives, in those intimate settings where you're advising them, what do you see as the biggest gaps, both in leaders now, because those conversations occur in the boardroom, and people who aspire to be leaders as they're thinking about that as they go along?
Thank you so much. This is a pleasure to be here. It is two different, very different set of questions. The one is the way how to get to the way up, and then what are the pains that you suffer once you're there. And the pains, the more you grow in your career, is much more a relationship problem. And you're very good technically, you're very good at solving problems operationally, but once you get up there, the problems, the variances between the plan and the result are so big today that the relationship with your team is the most problematic situation that you're gonna face. So what are the skills that you're gonna have to develop to be there in a calm base? You have to be calm. You have to be respectful. It seems very easy to say, but when you are in a crisis, are you respectful with your peers? Are you respectful with yourself? Do you have the capacity to listen and to pause before you decide or you plan the next move? So this is a bad thing, but it's also a good thing because we have been trained now lately to do this every day. Every day you wake up, you have a different news from the world, a lot of noise, plus you have to separate the noise from the truth, of course, but it's still having the ability to have good relationships despite the tension, despite the stress, and getting to the results and being honest and being humble. I mean, this is like everything that is not AI, right? Everything that is not AI. So I think this is one of when you're coaching a senior manager, when you're coaching a board member, the questions are about burnout. How do I deal with burnout? And how do I deal with difficult people? How do I explain myself? So XPSD.
When we were having this conversation, we were sort of exchanging our experiences with the type of people who are in the financial business and the investment business specifically, and what type of people are attracted to the business, and then what the skills are required to advance. And I would completely agree that the interpersonal relationship skills, how you motivate people, how you get them aligned on a strategy, how they know how to operate, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how to do it in the absence of their manager, really is the outcome of so much of leadership. And at the end of the day, you're right, it's all the things that can't be AI'd out, although I think sometimes AI can help you yourself become a bit better around that. One of the things that we see in our research, for those of you who've been around long enough, you'll know that in the 90s, the system was really around star managers. We then progressed to teams, and that was to address two-person dependency, business risk associated with star managers, and also to reflect the nature and progress of portfolio management and portfolio construction. And now our research shows us that there's a much more systems thinking approach. You are getting specialists with no finance background that are now part of a financial system. How do you develop common language, common values and beliefs? What does respect look like in Mexico versus Singapore versus India? These are all very different things, and many of us are working in global markets. We see the status right now, particularly in an age of AI being used in the investment process, is one of T-shaped skills, and it doesn't matter where you are in your career. You may have an area of specialization that contributes to it, but the ability on the horizontal of the T to be able to connect the dots requires people skills that can't all be done in a computer. And I would encourage you to look at our research on the investment professional of the future, because we've done quite a bit of extensive work on what those skills are, and it is the ability to connect the dots, to synthesize what you're seeing. And I would say from a leadership perspective, an executive perspective, the ability to take in a lot of information, synthesize it, and then to have enough communication skills to be able to relate that information and your objectives to a wider audience than a greater range of audience than you might have is a critical skill. We see that with CEOs who are now company therapists that forget all the regular stuff, deliver your results, get the financials, have a strategy, make sure your KPIs are on target, but can you communicate it to a wide range? How do you deal with social matters? your clients are asking more from you, your employees are asking more from you, and they can oftentimes be in conflict.
And how do you learn that? How do you learn that? And you learn that usually since you are born in your family. You have to have preferably a place where you can express yourself. You're free to express yourself. You're free to debate. You didn't have that. Maybe you did. But even if you didn't, and then you go to a school where you have to debate, we have to learn how to speak in public. You know, and then you didn't have that either. I'm sorry. So you have to take control of your future. And how do you communicate? You have to speak in public. You have to pay the uncomfort zone of learning to speak in public. You have to be able to synthesize. This is so important in Latin America. People speak so much and they say so little. And we don't have the time anymore. We don't have the time anymore for this. We have to pivot almost every week from one decision to another, to consider other variables that we hadn't, to think systematically in a system basis. We have to incorporate many more knowledge that we have, because we are financial people, right? But we have to think about talent. We have to think about the environment. We have to think about the communities that we're serving. So the only way to do that, to be able to speak about so many things at the same time, is to be able to synthesize, be very, very clear on your message, and don't waste your time, and even less so people's time. So when you climb the ladder, you can talk to your friends as much as you want about football, about whatever you want, but be clear. To be able to get there, you have to be you have to be able to resume an idea, to have an idea. And financial people usually do the opposite, right? They get a lot of data, and then they study a lot of data, and then they come to a few conclusions, and then they have a recommendation. That's the other way around now. Okay, you are in the top. You come with your recommendation. You give some 2 or 3 reasons why, and then if people need more details, you respond to the details. So this, and I learned this from my mother. We would go to the movies, and we'd go back and say, oh, the movie was about this. And no. I want to be one phrase. What was the message? What was the reason that they did this movie? And we would explain all the, what we saw. No, this is not enough. So what is about, I'm Still Here. Did you see the members? You're gonna have to talk about it. I'm Still Here. Did you watch that movie that won the Nobel Prize 1 year ago? The movie was about the impact of authoritarianism in a society. And it was about the dictatorship in Brazil. And you were kids, and we had to summarize the meaning of that. And we were trained about being synthetic in a thought. And so this is very important. You said something about working systems, of course, learning about everything as you can. You cannot not speak the language of the operations. You cannot not speak about the language of marketing. You cannot not speak the language of talent. You have to understand all this. Even if you major is finance, if you want to go up there, you need to be open and look for experiences in those areas. It's not comfortable. No, it's not comfortable. You may not have a lot of fun, but it's the only way to go not only deep, but wide in your career.
You have the ability to actually assess a lot of talent and to advise. I think I'm interested, probably everybody in this room is interested in what your thoughts are and conclusions on what separates really high potential professionals from those that aren't.
When you look at your kids, many of you already have kids. You know which one is the smartest. You know, and you know why? Because they are the first ones to try to help a brother or a colleague. They are the first ones to have an idea. They have the first ones to laugh at the other ones, so they have a good humor. They are curious. So these are the skills that we show since the beginning. But you can develop that. So basically, that kid in your office that raises their hand to do a project, to lead a project to solve a problem or to improve a process, is the guy that is trying to help a colleague, is the guy that understands what's going on, the guy that is listening and pausing before they speak. So these are the high potentials that are there with a perspective much more bigger than what the test is about. So these guys, they're gonna usually have the best options and the best opportunities because they are looking for them and they are making the team better. They don't have to be managers, they don't have to be the leaders of anything in particular, but you know that they will be there when a problem needs to be solved. And that's the high potential, intrinsically.
I think a lot about how the world has changed, particularly probably in the last 10 to 15 years. And so I started working in the 80s and in the business in the very early 90s. And it was so hierarchical. It was a real pyramid. There were very definitive career paths on the way up. In the last 10 to 20 years, largely is a reflection of the environment that we're operating in, which has gone from very stable, long tails to things to actually quite unstable and short cycles and the ability to pivot. I think that actually, as I reflect upon the work that we've done in diversity, it really came to inclusion. How do you have a wider set of talent that you can look at, cognitively different, experientially different? I've almost always worked in global systems or with multicultural teams, and to a North American, habits from the East can look very different, and if you're the dominant group, you can miss that. And we really see that in our research, that the idea of talent generationally is very different, and it's less hierarchical than it is now. And that, I think, is going to spawn unique ways for us to identify talent. It's going to require, I think, a wider aperture of how we assess people and how we build teams. And there's almost nothing that isn't done without teams. So I think in addition to the personal characteristics that you've talked about, I think what I hear you driving at is how do you build something beyond yourself that leaders, people running companies can actually identify. And some of that actually doesn't mean you need to be a leader in the sort of hierarchical sense. And, I've worked with profoundly impactful people in organizations and organizations' results that were just amazing individual contributors. And our systems were set up unusually for individual contributors. They got the biggest pay, they were the stars, and the pendulum then swung to something different. I think the systems that are coming through now recognize different ways to think about talent composition, and then again, how those people tend to elevate to the very top will exhibit a variety of skills, the ability to create environments where talent can flourish, never losing sight of the objectives, and in many regards, modeling and creating an environment of challenge. So back to your thing about where you come from. Many of us don't come from backgrounds where you're used to challenge and it can feel really uncomfortable. But I know in our own organization, we were very intentional about creating that. And the results don't come in the short term, but after about 3 years, we could actually see significant performance result as having diverse teams, frameworks that were reliable and repeatable, and it allowed those really great people to actually surface within I call it a reasonably fair playing field.
What about your career, Marie? How did you get there? What did you do differently? Because the pyramid is very...
It looks T-shaped, or it looks very ascendant. So mine is not an intentional career, and I think that's very different from the generation now. I think they're very much more intentional about where they want to be. And your background does matter. I'm the oldest of 6 children. I'm the only one on my father's side of the family to finish high school, although he's very smart, very successful. And I'm the oldest, and I'm a girl of an Irish Catholic family, so that probably explains 95% of it. I didn't start in the business. I landed in it accidentally and realized the data that was afforded on the markets was extraordinary. I thought this would be a very interesting business. And at the time, in the early 90s, there just weren't many women. And a portfolio manager said to me, if you want to do anything professionally, you will need a professional designation. I could not afford to go back to school, but I could afford to take a globally recognized designation, which is a CFA. And that opened so many doors for me. I was young. I was a woman. There were only 4 women in Canada doing those types of roles. And I looked like I was 12 years old. And I was, presenting generally to men that are now my age. And I would say that the era I grew up in, we didn't break through glass ceilings, but it's still a minority. And in many regards, that's afforded me some opportunities that I would otherwise not have had, and it's developed a resilience as you go up along. I do think that I said yes to a lot of opportunities, and I always saw myself in leadership. And I always built teams where we had individual contributors that were really important to our system, incredibly valuable, and to create space for those types of people. And if you come from a really large family, you generally know how to manage a whole bunch of different personalities. I will say that one of the things I did was I had to switch jobs. I get to a certain level, and then I wouldn't be promoted for a variety of reasons. And gender was one of them. And actually, I pivoted careers, but it afforded me a lot of different opportunities. One was startup. I worked for amazing global companies and then did a startup on wealth management. My institutional skills and training made me really think about the quality of professional advice and the way we built teams for high net worth individuals. And that was at a time when there just wasn't that kind of institutional approach. And so I think that all of those experiences shaped who I am. And then I had run companies. I had been CEO of a company in Canada, and then CFA Institute was looking for a CEO, and they approached me because I'd had a long affiliation with them. So your networks really matter. But many of you in here are part of the CFA community, and you know how diverse it is. You know that it's global, and in a virtual world, you can actually connect with so many people. Jeremy Siegel is going to speak next. I've had the privilege, Jeremy, of meeting you a couple of times. Here he is. He's This is somebody who is iconic in our industry. You will find him so colorfully with opinion and, a thought leader and somebody who shaped the way we think about asset classes, portfolios, the utility, short-term versus long-term. That widening of the aperture is really important because I still deeply love and care about credit principles and underwriting and what actually builds a portfolio. I carried all of that with me as I built out leadership skills. And that is the most interesting part for me. I'm not a specialist. I get to 80%, and I recognize that in myself. And I am most turned on by strategy, ideas, and then building teams that can execute. So most of it, which we talked about in our preparatory, was about self-reflection, which is not so pervasive in an industry that has to present confidence all the time. That habit can actually work against your career.
And that takes me to something very, very important about self-reflection, which is people say that we should have a mentor, executive coach, and a psychologist. Everybody. It's not that because you're broken, because you don't know what to do with your life. No. Just because we have so many options as human beings that we really need to take advantage of people that were there before us, like Mark. And we have to think about our blind spots before people catch them, preferably. So to get there, to get to the top, of course, you're already technically savvy, but try really hard to see yourself in the mirror and see if you can do better as a human being. If you are better as a human being, it's not something that is going to be solved in 3 minutes as you get information from Instagram. No, this is not going to be that fast. But it's going to be one of the main ingredients for you to be a good leader, to know yourself. How do I relate to other people? How do I impact other people the way I speak? How respectful? I think I'm respectful, and maybe I'm not. I think I listen very much, and I'm a good listener, and maybe I'm not. So these kind of professionals or mentors, you will help you to have a better team. And don't wait until you are either to do that. You start doing that very, very young as you can. I think that eventually we're gonna be all owners of our businesses. And if you wanna be the owner of your business, you need to be, you don't have to think about hard skills and soft skills. Develop your hard skills, but hand to hand with your soft skills. And when you talk about being adaptable, yes, you have to be adaptable. Things are changing all the time. There's no way not gonna be adaptable. We have to be. You have to be candid to people. You have to be very self-critical, but also judgmental, and also give feedback in a good way, in a nice way, in a way that creates space for people to grow. So when people ask me about soft skills, I don't think they are soft anymore, because it's very, very hard to develop the soft skills. But anyway, think about the mentor, the coach, and the psychologist. I'm serious, I'm not joking. And try to be a better person.
I will say that from the privilege of the position that I had, we talked to everybody in the ecosystem, and that comes from our neutrality. We're not for profit, so we don't have a commercial imperative for quarterly earnings, for instance. And more importantly, which I didn't appreciate when I assumed the position, was that we're not a trade association. So the only thing we look at is through the lens of, does this improve investor outcomes? Does it improve the investment system? Do we have better investment professionals as a result? And so that affords us the privilege to talk to not only asset owners, asset managers, but also central banks, government agencies, regulators. We see the whole 360. And one of the things that is very clear is that each one of us come at it from a very different, we may be looking at the same problem set, but we all come at it from a different lens. If I think back to the late 80s, early 90s, compute power gave us now the opportunity and ability to put capital asset pricing model, efficient market hypothesis, all these things to work. And when we talked about indices and benchmarks, they were a shortcut way to describe the market. Fast forward 35, 40 years later, and indexing and passive has taken a fundamentally different role. It's morphed into something that wasn't expected. And that is that benchmarks are now essentially a portfolio template. The most important decision you'll make in a sort of traditional way is to choose the benchmarks that you are going to use to measure your portfolio. We're doing quite a bit of work on total portfolio approach and on benchmarks, incentives, and time horizon. And we actually think that this is a moment where the next iteration, the next generations of building portfolios, understanding risk in a different way, really delving into client objectives, will end up with portfolios that are very different in the way that we think about them. That is actually, and because listen, at the end of the day, most of you are portfolio managers. What do you have to do? Meet or beat the benchmark over, frankly, a very short period of time, 1, 3, and 5 years, and that's how you get paid. And in the words of Steve Landsberg, people respond to incentives. The rest is merely commentary. So if you think we're at really a kind of tectonic shift in the way that we're looking at it, you're going to need to build teams differently. We're going to need to think about talent in a much wider, much greater perspective. I think that is super exciting, and it creates opportunities for many people. But the core fundamental traits and attributes of leaders and of very productive team members doesn't change very much. Can you take feedback? Can you adapt and pivot? Can you self-reflect and reflect deeply on what's happening in the market, what your clients are looking for, what regulators are looking for? Can you connect with others? That is a much broader skill set than we typically required of just about anybody. And it doesn't exempt people from acquiring those skills and technical expertise along the way. That can be overwhelming for some, and particularly for older demographics, right? The pace of change, the ways that we adapt to that change, the tools that we use are changing. But it's probably, and Jeremy, I'll put this question to you for your next one, leave you with it, is I think it is probably one of the most exciting times ever. And the reason is the decisions that we make on capital allocation, the portfolios we build, and the infrastructure will determine whether we allocate capital well on building out new infrastructure, rebuilding current infrastructure, our inclusion of society in the investment scheme. We know that individual investors hold tons of money that can be allocated in ways. If it's not a trustworthy system, and it's not one that's built on principles, then it'll fail. And that starts with leadership. And that starts with tone from the top and instills the values and principles all the way down. And that won't change even in an AI world. And every single calamity that we've seen in the industry has been bad principles, poor morals, lack of oversight, bad incentives. And that's on leadership at every level to be thinking about. That has greater purpose in many regards than activity overlaid onto the work that you're doing. I think it does take a new way of thinking about how we work, who actually ends up having a lot of that time to speak, and then how we build these teams. I think, do I see questions? Yes, there you are.
We got some questions. So, the first, third part, your question from the Alex. So let me. Talk about more about. You talk about responsibility distribution and this kind of leadership ownership along a diverse levels with the team. So we have this question about the sponsorship. Everybody talks about the sponsorship in what in Spanish we talk about mentorship and mentoring. So what are the must-haves of someone truly sponsored work? How can a professional and every professional cultivate these relationships where a sponsorship culture is still developing, or is not necessary to?
So I think as we put these programs in place, we've actually matured in the way we think about mentorship, sponsorship. A lot of what happens for all of your careers, most important thing that's said is what's said about you when you're not in the brain. And so who will advocate for you? You can be pretty strategic about in your career. You can have people who have wise, sage counsel who can provide you with perspective, like what Nymia does. You know, having boards think about how do we get instill in people these things. You give counsel. Then you have people who you're doing work with. They might be not overlapping with you at all, but they might be close enough. You've done stuff with them that they can actually sponsor you. They're going to stand up for you when the allocation of responsibilities is being distributed. They'll point out the things about you that others might not see because they're not close enough. And then I think a lot about the time pressure that most people face. If you are in a position to provide advice to people, micro mentorship moments can be just as important as anything else. Taking a few minutes to give feedback, to give advice when solicited. And if you want it from somebody, if there's someone you admire, somebody you think has things you can remember, just ask them, can you spend 5 minutes with me? We're in this room together. We're sitting at it, I know you won't have time for a coffee. I don't have enough time to have a coffee with all the people who ask me. But in the moment, I can genuinely give them a piece of advice for the context that we're in. So if I was sitting here in this room and somebody came up, I would probably have someone who say, in this moment, you can do these 3 things. Oftentimes they'll come back and tell you how it worked out. So then they have a significant data set. I think we need to think very differently about it. And if you have the opportunity to help somebody, do. And if you want help, ask for it. But you have to be clear, you have to be specific, and you have to recognize what that person will do. So it might not be just one person.
And Billette, maybe some comments about how to do that in practice. The top levels they are very alone, and so most of the times disconnected to the real life of people many levels below them. So even if you start in your career, it's all the younger people. They're always welcome to the big rooms. And I am somebody that has looked for these opportunities, and I was always well received in every big room for a 15-minute chat, and I would send an invitation or see a space in this person's agenda. It was I need to share some thoughts with you. I'm giving him something, offer something, right? And 15 minutes, okay, not today, tomorrow. And then, I'm very bad at taking a no. So eventually I would get the opportunity to talk to this person. And in all levels, it doesn't have to be the top guy. It can be 2 people above you, 3 people above you. So look for these opportunities. Don't be afraid. Try to offer something, right? Because it's a valuable time. So try to offer something valuable to this person. Try to know that. And also, I was asking my son, he's 25, do you know the owners of the business they were working on? No, I know them. I see them from time to time. And why don't you talk to them? Oh, they don't have time for me. I mean, and when they go to the bathroom, you follow them and you talk to them in the bathroom. So, be creative. If you read only about data and finance and geopolitics, try to go to the museums and see some art. Try to read some romance. Don Quixote de la Mancha. Have you read it, Mark? Don Quixote de la Mancha. Oh my God. It's one of the funniest books I have ever read, and it's so creative. Gives you ideas. So, relax. Be brave. You have so much to offer. Think about it. Try it.
And that's such a valuable advice, is that you want advice, just ask. And the vast majority of people will be happy to give it. And when the turn comes, when advice is asked, be open fears. That's the way it is. So, Nymia, you talk about this kind of leader that is curious, that looks for listening, that knows how to listen, and also how to make the team better. So we have this other question: what's one thing a global professional consistently underestimate when working international? What do you feel that's a shared position independent of the culture?
This is a very interesting question. Once I did a downgrade at Moody's that affected many portfolios. And I got calls from all over the world. And most of the people in the Americas, they were screaming at me. But people from Asia, they were so respectful. Nymia-san, don't you think that it was, a little bit too much? And, it was a great experience to see the reactions from all over the world, Europeans, Asians, and people from the Americas, on how they treat you. And I think one of the be polite, wherever you go. Please be polite. If you don't know how to be polite, look at YouTube. So yes, it's respect other people's feelings. We are humans. We are not machines. You're not dealing with a computer all the time. This person has fears. They fear their future. They fear you. They fear so many things that is in the game. So being sensitive, again, self-reflect on yourself. How do you the golden rule, treat others like you would like to be treated. So if you're polite, everybody can notice it everywhere in the world. So
I might, first of all, I actually really agree with that. The respect, particularly when you're entering into another culture, another set of customs, I think it's foundational. I think we deal very much, our teams are global, we deal with clients all over the world. A couple of things that are critical is the governance around it. So things like, if you have a smaller team in Asia, what time are they taking calls at on Teams calls? Everybody is stuck to calls. What time are they taking calls at? Asians typically take longer to say things, and they will never interrupt or talk over somebody. Okay, does that mean there are voices that aren't being heard? does that mean that other considerations are being missed? So there are a couple of, I think, things to keep in mind, maybe 3 things to keep in mind when you're dealing with global Ts. One is just to take a look at the practices and ask yourself, who's at the short end of the stick? And is there a way to kind of balance that out? The second thing is that the person who speaks first in any meeting sets the tone. And so if you're in a leadership position or if you're in meetings, you should be paying attention to that and making sure that the tone is set properly. Because oftentimes the person who speaks first is not necessarily the person who should be speaking at first. And then finally, technology allows you the ability to analyze many of your meetings and your interactions. And so I think actually back to the self-reflection, sometimes when I've looked at that data, I've been horrified at my own performance. I inadvertently was dominant. That's really important and actually has very negative consequences if you are in a position of authority, right? You change the way people give you information. So I can think a lot about the governments. Remember, who speaks first sets the tone. Take a look at just the data around who's got the short end of the stick, and then make sure you've got all voices. There's a really great little case study exercise that Harvard does, and it's climbing to Mount Everest. And the punchline of it is there are 2 questions that you can ask. Everybody has a persona, everybody has information. You're not the same person and you don't have the same information and you have different incentives. So 2 things you can ask at every meeting or every outside of a project. Number 1, is there any information that anybody has that it's important for what we're doing that we don't know? Now, make sure those voices that aren't going to interrupt and overspeak get heard. So you need to leave time for that. The second thing is there's an accountability for people to have to speak up. You didn't tell us that. We gave you an opportunity. The second question is how are you going to be measured on success? What are your incentives? And you end up with 3 things. One, where your objective goals or KPIs are aligned. The second is where it doesn't really matter. You have some that are different than mine, who cares? The third, which is really important, where are our incentives in conflict? And how do we resolve those? So the 2 questions can be foundational. Does anybody have any information that we don't know that's important for this? What are your metrics of success? How are you being evaluated? Let's put them on the table and understand where we're perfectly aligned and where we have conflict.
In that space, there's a saying that, tell me where the incentives are and I can tell you the future. Something like that. And tell me where the incentives are aligned and I can tell you the future. And I thought we got that. So let me end with a connect question and talk about a little bit about the CFA show. So we're in the 40 of the 500 members of CFA. So CFA, you told Mark about how the CFA charter about your family, but called the CFA was its opportunity as an equalizer. That those who distinguish where one comes from, the region, is just, we like to think about the CFA as this meritocracy. And in the medium and long term is the networking, a community of colleagues at the national level, at the regional level, and international level that went through a very hard experience. So it's relevant that he asked, how do we nurture a meritocratic and responsible financial organization? In a global, from a global perspective.
So I actually think this is one of the greatest things about the CFA program. It's entirely democratic on the way in, unlike the most prestigious programs at that sort of early career. The schools that you can think about, really hard to get into them, but pretty much everybody gets through it. We're the reverse of that. Anybody can take it, very difficult to actually get through, and there's a level of competence and because there's an assessment. First of all, congratulations to CFA Society Mexico for hitting that 500 charter holder member. And the reason that's important is if I think and reflect on the last 2 days that I've been here, we have met with really, really important people. We've met with people from all parts of the ecosystem. And unfortunately, it was announced that your U.S. ambassador, or the ambassador to the U.S. was announced because we were to meet him today. And of course, your president had other plans for him today. But that's a kind of access that we have because you have critical mass here in the market and because many of your charter holders are in very senior positions. This system is going to be built out with different type of talent. We talked about the humanities, people with philosophy degrees, thinking more broadly about how do we ask the right questions to get the right outcomes. You still need training, you still need those technical, we still need people that are competent, who know how to do it. Good news about finance and investments is it can be taught. It can be taught. And so I think what we're doing at the foundational level is excellent. We've revamped the program to be very appropriate for what's going on in the market, what employers need, and what candidates are looking for. It has a benefit, right? Because we now know that careers are not made by just that one foundation. So the lifelong learning is faster, more, and needs to be specific and related to the outcomes that the industry is looking for, employers are looking for. So you'll see that we're really doing that and applying best learner practices. So you talked about Instagram. Kids want mobile, modular, gamified. Well, as it turns out, I actually learn best that way too. These are design principles that make all of us better. So I think this community, you start with this rigorous thing, which is really bonding when you get through it. It can last a really long time. I know from my experience that part of the reason I'm here, I can go back to so many moments in a room of charter holders which were in my ecosystem that were very different than me, that I had a conversation with. I got a job once showing up at something. And I think that that's what you're doing here as CFA Society Mexico. Set really high standards, be ambitious for the national agenda, attracting capital, and then investing it here really appropriately. Use your convening power. Look at how many people have showed up and how many people have stayed. I know Jeremy's the attraction, but the room has been filled for all of the things. So I'm terribly optimistic about where we're headed, and for CFA Society Mexico. As a Canadian, I'm really happy to be here as we navigate things. This community is talking about them in ways I won't expect today, but this is an interesting perspective for a Canadian. That happens in our global community, and it happens here locally.
Thank you very much. It was such a pleasure, Marg. It was such a pleasure, Nymia. Marg, as we say, let's go. Mi casa es tu casa. Feel always welcome to Vegas.
I'm back in December for personals.
And as we wrap up this very interesting chat on the future of financial profession, I would like to thank you, Nymia, for joining us here today, and especially would like to thank you, Marg, for joining us and for this very long relationship that we have had. We had you here 3 years ago, and there's a lot of future in your financial career as well, with so many changes that are coming, and we wish you the very best. And that you have so much quality time with your family back there in Toronto and everything. We look forward to seeing you well and happy. Thank you very much, and please a big round of applause for